What is up, Guerrilla Social Work fans? We are rolling into another episode of the Guerrilla Social Work podcast with Jeff Moore and yours truly, Mace Warren, where we discuss all things related to forensic clinical social work. This episode of the podcast, as always, is brought to you by Alpha Counseling and Treatment. Alpha Counseling is the largest and most respected treatment provider in the gorgeous state of Utah for clients involved in the criminal justice system. If you are involved in the criminal justice system, or if you have a loved one who needs help, please call Alpha Counseling today at 801-645-5455 or visit our always modest website at www.utahsbesttherapy.com. Today's episode of the podcast features a discussion about study habits among college students and the potential use for stimulants. We came across a couple articles that we thought were pretty good, and since it's finals week, this is kind of a moment in time podcast, so if you're listening to this, and this is more geared towards our student population, then you have a stake in listening to kind of what your study habits are and how much more likely you are or are not to use stimulants while you're studying, if that's something that you want to avoid. We also jump into our problem-solving method, which is a cognitive behavioral therapy skill that we teach our clients. So, without any further delay, I give you episode number 37. All right, man. Looks like it's just me and you this time, huh?
Yep.
Well, and this is take 2, by the way, because I'm an idiot, and our first recording I completely screwed up. So we're talking about the same topic over again, and I don't know if we're going to screw it up this time or do better this time.
Dude, this is what's in my head about this kind of thing. It's like, because we did pretty good, man. It was a decent podcast. Like, I think we made some good points, explained some things well, cracked some jokes in it. I get to where I'm like, shit, how did I put that? And I want to try to reproduce and oh yeah, I said that a cool way. I liked how I said it. It's like, bro, okay, ask me this, and then I'll pretend like it's the first time I've heard it, and then, but you can't do that, man.
Yeah. Well, again, I guess it's just us working out the bugs. So
yeah.
So whatever, although it still bears worth talking about the. We originally intended to record this, and it just seems like we do all our recordings around fights, and it's
right.
the most. I wouldn't say the most epic. Well, no, I guess it is the most epic old man fight. Although I don't know how real the whole thing was between Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. What did you think overall of that whole thing?
You didn't feel like it was real?
It was real, but there was obviously those weird rules. Like you were referring to them as old man rules
the
throughout.
Old man rules, yeah.
Right. Like if they got cut, it's over.
2-minute rounds.
Right. 2-minute rounds. And one of the rules that was really funny that I saw, because I was just I was listening to Schaub's podcast and he was talking about it. And he was talking about one of the rules was if one of them gets knocked out, it's over. I was like, well, yeah.
Yeah, that's how it goes. That's typically the end of the fight.
In anybody's fight. So I don't know why all of a sudden that was different. But I don't know. I thought they did pretty good, man.
I still get excited for Mike Tyson. I can't help myself. It's like, so very first memory I have of Tyson, my parents aren't even big fight fans, but it was when Mike Tyson fought, I want to say Spinks, and it was a pay-per-view, got my whole family over there. I was a kid, I was single digit age or whatever, and I remember everybody was so jacked for this fight. It was over inside of 2 minutes, and Tyson just leveled the dude, and from there it's like I've just have had this fascination with them. He's not he's a real life person, but he's had this character arc of savage, youngest heavyweight champ ever, to criminal, to psycho who tattoos his face, to washed up fighter that lost his interest, to now he's a cannabis farming hot boxing with Mike Tyson type of dude. Now he's back to fighting again, and he looks shredded for a 50. What year? How old was he?
53. Yeah, I think 53. So no, I agree, man. He's he's a genuine lunatic, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah, like his character arc. It reminds me, he sounds like a Stephen King character or something. You know what I mean? Like, so it's always pretty fun to do that. So, well, yeah, and I mentioned that we're alone because we have at least for our next couple of podcasts, we got guests, right? Some guests lined up.
Yeah, we have a couple villains to victory.
Man, we're reviving that series, huh?
Finally, yeah. It's been a while. I think Dallas was probably the last one we did, and that was like 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, and I wasn't even there for that, huh?
Right? Yeah.
Okay.
You're right, yep.
Okay. Yeah. So a couple villains to victory, and then we have we're gonna have a dad come in and talk about suicide, right?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, okay.
So here's the thing. This is going to put a little bit of pressure on you, bro. But you've got to get video up and going by the new year, because the most important podcast we're going to do is going to be like just see how the human body holds up under 435 pounds of weight.
Yeah. Well, so I mean that like I'm going to get it up and running anyway, and hopefully before then, because as far as our YouTube channel, I think it'd be good to have. I don't know. We'll probably lose listenership because now we have our ugly mugs on the podcast. But
they already know what we look like.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they do. But not in real like
action.
I feel like when when you're smiling and cheesing it or whatever, like you have one way of looking at it, but then when you're in real time doing a podcast, and sometimes we're scrubbing it.
Oh, total derp face.
Yeah, they'll be like, ugh, it just But I don't know. It seems like it has value. Yeah, so that'll be good. Yeah, I have a bench press coming up in January, provided that one of my shoulders doesn't rip out of socket in the meantime.
When was that you hit? So like, for the listeners, I spotted Mace when he did 425 pounds. Was that a year ago, 2 years ago? When was that?
At least 2 years ago.
Ridiculous amount of weight.
Yeah. Well, it was at least 2 years ago. And so I think this year I've done a little bit better with putting weight on.
You're a fat boy.
Yeah. In previous years, I haven't been able to put weight on as well as I would have liked to, and this year's been a lot better. So I think that being too light it doesn't go well with a whole lot of weight. So
that's got to be the difference. Like since I've sort of shifted up how I train, and a lot of the weightlifting I do is more dedicated to like performance for jiu-jitsu. I'm lighter than I've been, and I figured that I'm getting weaker just because I'm getting older, because I still push myself hard, but it's not like I'm not carrying around enough on my frame to crush the amount of weight I used to.
Yeah, there's something to it. So, so hopefully that might be one of those I don't know, ridiculousness videos where the weight just comes crashing down on me. And
it would if I was trying 435, bro.
We'll see what happens. Yeah, that's going to be with Arlo, right?
Yep.
We're having him back.
Oh, yeah. Arlo's going to be coming on. That's
mental
right.
Health and exercise. So, well. So today, we this is kind of a moment in time podcast, I suppose you might say, because we're in December 1st today of 2020, and this is also finals week. And one of the things we wanted to do was speak to our student audience who's listening to this. It's kind of a pretty big, collection of our listeners. And we wanted to talk about study habits, what goes into those, and specifically, like, what are potentially some risk factors that go into, students' use of stimulants to aid in their study habits. And so, I guess a good place to start is maybe just talking about our experiences.
Right.
Like back in either graduate school or undergrad, I don't know, all of us to some degree or another are exposed to this. I guess I'm curious from your perspective, Jeff, like what did you kind of notice going on with other students that you were going to school with back then?
As far as like study drugs?
Yeah, or any ways of enhancing their study habits up to and including study drugs. Yeah.
So the people I hung around with, it wasn't done a ton. It was kind of this thing that was like talked about a bit, but I did notice, and again, I don't know if it had to do with the athletes or what, but it seemed to be that like a lot of the athletes that lived in the dorms at Weber State, they had to keep a certain GPA, and I guess you put that on top of the physical demands of, football practice or whatever it is. And, like some of those, there was kind of a underground sort of Ritalin black market type deal, but it wasn't huge with my particular group of friends that I was hanging around with, but it was there though.
Okay, so obviously you were aware of it.
Well, I was aware of it.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, I don't know. I guess I didn't study very much with other people. I kind of stuck to myself, although I did have, and there was typical stuff like people drinking, 5 rock stars at a time, or taking NoDoz or whatever the hell it is, like pretty typical stuff. But and I certainly was aware of people who had taken Adderall or some type of stimulant. The one that stuck out to me the most was when I was going to BYU for my graduate program. Shout out to BYU. And this kid, honor code and all, by the way, had told me that his study method was he would put 8 nicotine patches on, and that would help him stay up all night. And I was thinking, it would either do that or kill you. One of those two things. It seems
8
like
nicotine. Yeah. Where would he put them? Just like on his back or something?
I don't. Who knows, dude? I have no clue. I wasn't like, show me, man. Like, he's like, I get like 7 or 8 nicotine patches. I'm good for the whole night. I'm like,
well, wait. Like, would he put them? Maybe you don't know this, but when you're saying that, I'm imagining that he's putting all 8 on at once, and then I thought maybe that's one after the other.
Well, no. Well, to me, in my mind, I always thought it was all 8 at once.
8. That's how I'm visualizing it. That's how I choose to
That's
think
how.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't qualify that and ask him to kind of clarify, but that's kind of the what was happening. And I guess overall, the story is that students have an awful lot of pressure to do well in school, right? I mean, there's a lot riding on these classes and the grades that you get out of these classes. I mean, I've heard on a lot of different podcasts, as also books and whatnot of leadership, that a lot of times prospective employers are simply looking at the fact that you attended a college for 4 years or 6 years at a time and were able to obtain a degree, and whether or not that degree actually matches the qualifications of the job, the fact that you stuck to it and did it is often enough of a qualification for them hiring you. Mm-hmm. So staying in school, and I think like getting good enough grades, at least to that degree, is important for people's future. After all, you're also paying for this and or going into debt for it. So, it is important. And then the other thing is specifically if you want to go on to further higher education, this becomes ever more important. Like I was talking to a guy who was going to be applying for his PhD, and he told me that he was really worried about his GPA when he was applying because he had a 3.85 overall GPA, and I was like,
he was worried.
Yeah, I was like, damn, dude, a 3.85 ain't gonna cut it.
Where was he applying?
I think Purdue is where he was his primary goal, and then there was a couple others, but I just want to acknowledge that a lot of the students are experiencing a lot of pressure that's coming down to this. And so one of the things we wanted to talk about, because we came across a couple of pretty cool articles that I think highlight some of these things that, is worthwhile to discuss, and then maybe give you guys, like in kind of the fashion that we go about this, a intervention to maybe use when you're determining the best methods for study. So, the other thing was I was thinking about like, weren't you part of a fraternity back when you were in your undergrad?
Yeah, Pi Kappa Alpha.
Okay. And was there, obviously you guys, did you guys all live in the exact same house, or how did that work?
Yeah, I lived in the fraternity house. There were, so at Weber State, the Greek system was disbanded like maybe 30 years prior because another fraternity was running drugs out of the fraternity houses. Yeah, not study drugs like the good kind, the fun kind. Yeah, and so all fraternity houses at Weber State were 86'd basically, and so to still get the Greek system experience, me and 5 other dudes, we would rent a house and we would live there. So I lived in the fraternity house for 2 consecutive years, and it was just a regular house that we absolutely destroyed. Like, we not only lost our deposit, we had to pay out an additional $2,000. Had to get recarpeted. I don't know how many, and I repaired I don't know how many holes in the wall. I'd use like the cardboard from cartons of beer as the patch thing, and just I mean, it was a wreck. I feel bad for the dude that we rented from. We were so indignant too when he was trying to get us to pay money for all the stuff we destroyed.
Yeah, how dare he?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that's fun. It's funny that reminds me. I equally regret and have pride in not ever joining that fraternity, and I will tell you guys why. And this is right along with my character. If anybody knows anything about me. There was I won't mention his name because that's rude, but there was one gentleman that was from our high school that was able to join that fraternity. And let me just tell you folks, this guy was like, okay, if you think of the word dweeb, right? Dweeb, and just picture a person, like just picture a dude and what that person looks like. I guarantee the exact replica of this dude is in your head right now. And one way or another, he made it into this fraternity. So then I was like, well, wait a minute. If that dude can make it in, I don't want to be part of those reindeer games. Which
there's something to what you're saying. Like the thing is, there's some level of, all right. So look, there were a lot of guys in the fraternity that, if not for the fraternity, I would never have been friends with. Probably because my path would have never crossed. But just for example, and I'll quit yapping about the fraternity in a second here. But like in the fraternity house, I lived with this dude that's from Ghana, another guy that he was like a total Star Trek type of guy, computer programmer. The cast from Half Baked, the movie with Dave Chappelle and whoever else is in that, and a gigantic ogre from Washington that played football. It was a most motley crew cast of characters I'd have never been friends with, but now I am, and I don't know. It was a cool experience, but yeah, I don't blame you.
Well, I guess my only exposure to fraternities is having watched Revenge of the Nerds. Which speaking of ogre, by the way, dude, like I had saw previews of that, and like I'd seen like little clips of it and everything, and I just was like, wait, why are these dudes so mad? Like, what? I mean, that guy was literally yelling.
Oh, he hated him.
Going cross-eyed and stuff. I'm like, what could they possibly do? And then I watched it, and then I was like, oh, yeah. Dude, I hate these nerds. And then there's that one part where that dude, the main nerd dude, he puts on that Darth Vader mask and rapes that chick.
But it wasn't even couched as rape in the movie. It was like this, yeah, the nerd got to get laid by someone that's not his girl. Like,
dude, and then in true fact, she just falls for him after that too. I was like, oh, come on.
Maybe that's what kickstarted us off on this career. We see this culture of rape, if you will. That is nuts, though. Like, looking back on it, like, how the hell did that fly?
Yeah, that you couldn't make that movie now.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I'm glad. The alpha betas and the lambdas, the trilambs. Right? That's a thing of fiction. But I guess I would say that the other thing that we're going to factor into this is like peer influences, because peer influences is a big factor as to whether or not apparently that you're going to use these too. So as far as the study goes, the studies go that we were referencing on this. The name of the study this comes from the Journal of American College Health, and the title was Study Strategies and Study Drugs, Investigating the Relationship Between College Student Study Behaviors and Prescription Stimulant Misuse. And this was written by Abby Johnson Holm, Hannah Hossman,
Jeez.
and Matthew G. Rhodes, looks like. Okay. So basically what they did was they took 334 college students, and this was at a large Midwestern university, so obviously not going to be named, right? And what they examined was they looked at those who misuse prescription stimulants to compensate for maybe poor study strategies or lack of study strategies overall. And they kind of hypothesized that regular spacing of the studying, meaning that they're going to plan ahead and give themselves more time rather than just cramming the day before, and using more study strategies and using more effective study strategies would ultimately predict lower odds of prescription stimulus misuse. And so, in contrast, they hypothesized that if they had ineffective study strategies, that would predict, and if the students were not using any spacing or planning, and in other words, just crammed for tests, that would predict higher odds of prescription stimulant misuse. And the results basically said that regardless of their spacing, meaning that regardless of if students planned for this ahead of time, or if they crammed for it, neither of those were predictors. They were just as likely in either case to use prescription stimulants, which is kind of nuts. Like, you would think that the kids who planned it out might be a little less impulsive and therefore might not use the prescription stimulants, right?
I would have bet the house on that. It's weird that doesn't pan out.
Yeah, and so what they also said was that that the more study strategies that were used, so if you and when they talked about study strategies, they were talking about like the use of flashcards or taking practice tests or
mnemonic devices,
stuff like that.
Johnny Mnemonic,
worst movie ever.
Yeah, horrible. Damn, Keanu.
Yeah, that those would be predictors as well. And I'm kind of curious, like I don't know, study habits seem to be, I think that paying attention to that, like, study habits of anybody would be predictors. And I mean, what would you think, Jeff? Like, I mean, if you had more study habits versus less study habits or study strategies, would you see more or less prescription stimulant misuse?
Well, to me, like intuitively, the way I think about it is, the more, tools in your toolbox, and, if you have multiple ways to approach a complex thing like studying for a test, and, the more varied approaches that you have, the more effective you're going to be. So probably you would be more efficient and therefore not need to take as many drugs. I know the answer to this, but that is that is what I would have said.
Yeah, and me too. I mean, it tends to be, I guess you could say, in my mind, I think about that, and what comes to me is it almost seems like they're incorporating multiple study strategies to do better, and that seems like somebody who is well thought out,
yeah,
and has thought this through. What they actually found was that a greater number of total study strategies predicted higher odds of prescription stimulant misuse, and also if those were effective study strategies. So if they were deemed effective versus ineffective, if they were using, and that was by a multiple of 1.36. So you were 1.36 more likely to use prescription stimulant misuse if you incorporated more total study strategies.
What's it saying about effectiveness, though?
So if you used effective, they categorized effective versus ineffective study strategies, right? So an ineffective study strategy might be something like, I mean, they didn't really do well to quantify exactly what those were, at least with the information that I read. And I don't know, like one of the things was listening to or like reading through a book one time and calling it quits, or something like that. Pretty ineffective study strategy. Are you going to do flashcards to go over important material? You're going to highlight? You're going to write down a study guide? What are you going to do? And none of that was done. So just kind of once over, glance at the material and call it good.
I see.
And not really, and certainly go to classes, pay attention to the lecture, but not take many notes for studying later on. Ineffective study strategies at that point. But what they said was effective study strategies. So if you were using, ineffective or effective, if you were using more study strategies, you were 1.36% more likely, or 1.36 times more likely, rather, to use prescription stimulant misuse. Now, if you used effective study strategies, then you were 1.7 times more likely to use prescription stimulant misuse. And that went up each time, 1.75 more, if you incorporated more study strategies. So if you had 3, then you were even more likely to use prescription stimulant misuse. And the last predictor was the higher importance of school predicted higher odds of prescription stimulant misuse.
That makes sense.
So, but basically,
you got more riding on it. You're gonna do whatever you got to do. It's like steroids for your noggin,
Well, but it seems opposite of what you would think to be true. So the students who plan ahead of time, incorporate multiple effective study strategies, and it's an important discipline for which they're studying. Those are the most likely to use prescription stimulants.
Man, it almost kind of endorses using prescription stimulants.
yeah. It was like one time when I was...
What direction is this podcast going?
I'm just... Basically, they're just saying students, may not be misusing prescription stimulants as a substitute for effective studying, but rather to augment effective study habits. They were trying to improve their already effective study habits. And that's where you have to question if it's actually if it's moving the needle. You know what I mean? Is it actually making a difference? So that person's obviously trying to move it forward. But dude, that reminds me, when I started at Weber State, shout out to Weber State University. When I first started there, I was with our good friend Alan Falls, and we attended like their orientation. And there was this dude that got up there, and he was talking about methamphetamine, and so he's talking about it, and he's like, when you take meth, it makes you feel great. You can get a lot done. You have endless amounts of energy. You feel like you're on top of the world. You can focus more. You higher cognitive capacity. The sex is awesome. I'm like, is he going to try to sell this shit to us?
Seriously.
Where's this going, man? Yeah. And then he just kind of cut off, and he's like, well, introducing my next colleague. I'm like, wait a minute. like, are you even going to say, yeah, but drugs are bad? Like, anything? I mean...
Had a little Walter White now.
Yeah. So I guess this is maybe a testament to the amount of pressure these students are under. And how much pressure they're placing on themselves as a matter of getting into this, don't you think?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So one of the other thing that we talked about was this relationship between your peers, because there was another study that was put out, and it was titled "The Moderating Role of Positive Peers in Reducing Substance Use in College Students," and this kind of speaks to what we were talking about earlier. And this also came from the Journal of American College Health. And basically, what they were just saying was, if you were with a positive peer affiliation, and have good self-regulation, future orientation, consequential thinking, that was negatively related to substance use, except for binge drinking, of course, because after all, we're in college, right?
Absolutely.
But if you're with what they determined to be a deviant peer affiliation, that was positively associated with substance use, and it was more likely that we're going to use this. So a couple of things that we want to kind of factor into this is obviously, I think, each college student is going to determine this for themselves. I'm not casting any judgments aside. We all graduated DARE back in the day, and we know don't do drugs. I think the question is it necessary, and are there other ways of going about this? And I think the answer to both of those is, maybe, is it necessary? Well, I think that's up to the person.
What part necessary?
Using drugs, using stimulant, misusing prescription strength stimulants.
Okay.
Is it necessary? So it seems that starts to get really moral, and I don't want to cast I would say objectively, no, it's not necessary. And are there other methods to resolving this? And I'd say, of course, yes.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we want to target today, because when we deal with, it's a complex issue, and when we deal with complex problems with our clients, we have an intervention for them. And what do we call that, Jeffrey?
It's problem solving.
Holla.
Yeah.
So problem solving. If you're going to introduce this to clients, what's your first? How do you introduce this to them? What's your pitch to them?
All right. So basically, so when it comes to problem solving, historically, as a just from like a therapist mental health point of view, I've always taught clients cost benefit analysis or decision matrix, which I'm not really going to go into today for it's outside the scope of what we're talking about here. But the decision matrix and cost benefit analysis are helpful. You could look it up. But once we were trained from the University of Cincinnati doing the CBISO stuff that we talk about quite a bit, I really ended up quite liking this method here. And so it is module 6, which means it's like well deep into the curriculum that we teach. So typically I don't have to sell it to clients at that point. So really, I guess we're selling this to the listeners, you guys listening to this right here, that this, if you're able, this does work better if you write down some of what we're saying as far as the method. If we had visual capabilities, we could pop something up on the screen right now, but it does help to write some of this down, because you want to take, a lot of times when we have a problem, here's my sales pitch to people. When you have a problem that's like multifaceted and complex, it's tough to keep track of all the competing thoughts and goals that you're trying to achieve and methods through which you would try to achieve them all at once. It's the same reason that I tell people to write down a behavior chain. It kind of takes all the traffic jam mess inside your head and gets it out on paper in front of you where you can look at it. So it's a 3-step process. And the step 1 is we tell them to identify your problem and your goal. So when we're talking about a problem, we're often talking about a dilemma, a situation like the problem could be, I have a test coming up in a week, and I need to study for it. We can refine this problem as we get going into it, but then we want to state a goal. So we have our problem, a test coming up in a week that I need to study for, and a goal. And you can have more than one goal. And so one goal would be, I want to do really well on this test.
Isn't it? This is also, the goals is where the dilemmas start to come up, right?
Right, exactly.
The problem tends, it seems like a shortcoming in this step. If step 1 is identify your problem and goal, the shortcoming is not necessarily in identifying the problem. The shortcoming is not realizing the goals and quantifying them, because this is really where the conflict comes in, because you can have goals that don't always converge with one another, and this is where your decision making process tends to break down when you have competing goals. Yeah,
that's a really good point. So I'll lay out 2 or 3 potential goals, and you'll be able to spot the problem pretty quick. So my first goal is, I want to do really well on this test. Another goal is, I want to maintain a healthy lifestyle, drug-free. And another one might be that I want to preserve my relationship with my friends and family during this, like crazy time of studying and holidays and all the competing variables. So if we have those three goals of, I want to do well on the test, I want to live a healthy lifestyle, drug-free, and I want to preserve my relationships with my girlfriend and family. What problem does that bring up?
Well, and the problem essentially is, I've got finals coming up, right? I mean, that's essentially the problem. But the goals are, as you said, I want to do well on these tests. I want to live a healthy lifestyle that also includes being drug-free, and I also want to maintain and these personal relationships that I have going on during this period of time, right? And I like the problem one of the things that we really have to be careful with when we're talking about the problem is stating it objectively. And when we're talking to clients about the problem, we say, objective essentially means we're going to try to take emotion and opinion out of the equation when we're just stating the problem. So if I just state the obvious, I've got a finals in a week, right? I mean, that's an obvious problem. I'm going to have to do something about this, which I think also signals that, any inaction about this is going to result in consequences that I don't like. So a problem usually is specified by, if there's a problem that I don't think I have any stake in, that doesn't really mean anything, you're not going to be really dedicated to it. This is something that's going to come to pass, and you have to address it. And if you don't, it's going to result in either positive or negative consequences to you one way or another. And that's potentially what we're trying to lay out here. So I think an objective way of describing that is I have finals in a week, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Shortened to the point and objective.
So step 2 is what?
Brainstorm options and choose the best one. So brainstorming, everybody's heard that term, and you probably were taught that in school and did it at some point. And kind of the most common thing when I say, okay, tell me what is involved in brainstorming, a common response is typically throw out whatever ideas that you have, no ideas or bad ideas. Just let your mind free associate and generate a list of potential solutions. And that's exactly what we'd encourage to do. So again, brainstorm options and choose the best one. So how do you, when you're introducing this to clients, how do you explain brainstorming to clients? Like what direction do you get them going?
Well, this is one of the areas where I get the most pushback, actually. And the reason why is, because the answer tends to be obvious, at times. So, and perhaps it is, but that's not the point of brainstorming. So, I mean, the obvious answer, the obvious option is, plan and study hard and don't do drugs and make sure you're keeping in contact with your family, dummy.
Problem solved.
Okay. So now most people listening to this, that's the conclusion that they're going to jump to. Now the problem with that is that you're shortchanging yourself and you're not identifying, you're not really, this is, so problem solving is a cognitive process that involves multiple mental computations, and I think going in one direction is not using the problem-solving method. That is assuming that you have the answer and going with it. Now, the problem, I guess the shortcoming to that is that when you, in the heat of the moment, right now it sounds great. I mean, when I'm talking to clients and I'm asking them about, potential what-ifs, that's like what if therapy, and it's silly. So I say, okay, all right, Eugene, what if Chuckles and Ray Ray roll up on you, in the hood, and they offer you some heroin? What are you going to do? Well, Eugene doesn't say, man, I'll take that dope and go slam it. Like, nobody's going to say that. No client in their right mind is going to tell me that, right? They're going to tell me exactly what they should do. And I'm not saying that they don't believe this either. They're going to tell me, well, I probably should tell them no and, change my life and walk away. I'm a good job, Eugene. You're going to be just fine. No, he's not. He's not going to be just fine, because what do we know about Eugene that tells us that that's not likely to happen unless he takes some additional steps?
Past behavior. I mean, if you're running a group in prison and Eugene's sitting there and you're having this conversation about, would you or would you not use heroin? He's in prison talking to you. And this isn't to say Eugene is dishonest or anything of the like. It's that when he's in a therapy session, his mind is very much focused on what it should be, but it does not mimic the realities of life and the different variables that Eugene's going to be experiencing when he no longer is in prison and he no longer has an officer looking over his shoulder at every opportunity, and he has a mortgage to pay and kids to feed, and stress is building up, and the old urges to use come urging to the surface. So Yeah, this brainstorming options thing is that's exactly, I think, the point that you're making, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of that quote that it's I can resist everything except temptation or something.
That's awesome.
Kind of like, yeah, I really like, but I think you're not factoring in that, okay, in a sterile environment when we're just talking about a scenario, of course Eugene's going to do the right thing. That's not the point. He's going to tell me that he's going to do the right thing. In the heat of the moment, when he's with his buddies, his friends that he doesn't want to disappoint, and this turns into a dilemma, that I want to maintain good relationships with, and also now I'm triggered because they've offered me free drugs, and my limbic system is activated, the thinking part of my brain, my frontal cortex is starting to shut down, I'm starting to have cravings, I'm not thinking correctly. Okay, now let's have a conversation with that Eugene, and let's see what comes out. So I think throwing out shitty options is useful, okay? Not because you're going to do them. That's not the point. The point is I'm going to throw out bad options because they do have a function. And I've described this before. There was I watched a TED Talk with this guy. He's a behavioral economist. His name's Daniel. I can't pronounce his last name.
Oh yeah, he's good.
Yeah, he's got like a burned face and shit. So he was he.
Oh, you're being serious?
Yeah,
Daniel.
I can't pronounce his name, and he has a burned face. I think he has a burned face.
Yeah.
But or he's hideous. No, I'm just kidding, Daniel. but no, good looking dude.
Last name's rough though.
Yeah, I just can't pronounce it because I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
So he was going over this kind of personal research project that he did, and he sent out this. Basically, he was sending out to these were MIT students, and he was sending out just basically a poll on which selection would they choose for subscription to The Economist magazine. And the first set of students had 3 options. And so option 1, and I'm not sure about the numbers, so don't quote me on this. You guys will get the idea. So option 1 was I could subscribe to the paper account for the Economist magazine for $25, right? Option 2 was I could subscribe to the web-based version of the Economist magazine for $45. And option 3 was I could subscribe to the paper and web-based version also for $45. So if I give you those 3 options, Jeff, which one do you think most of the students felt had the most value?
Oh, option 3. You get the paper version and the online version.
Well, right. Okay. And so in terms of the selection, in terms of which one had the most value, 100% said that one had the most value. Okay. So then he goes back and he eliminates the middle option. Okay, he goes back, and not with the same group of students, same number of students. He found another group of students, and he eliminated the middle option. So the shittiest option was option 2, the web-based version, because you got it for the same price as the web and paper-based, right?
Right. So he eliminated that one.
Right. Price is exactly the same. And so the subscription for the paper was $25, and the subscription for the web and the paper was $45. And what ended up happening was it wasn't a complete turnaround, but more students said that the paper subscription was more valuable than the web and the paper subscription. So the shitty option was useless in that we weren't going to use it, but it wasn't useless in helping us understand the value of the best option. And that's why you throw in bad options, is because it helps promote the good options. Because sometimes not using drugs or buckling down for a test or like keeping in contact with your relationships, those reminds me of that Chris Rock joke that's like, people brag about paying their bills. Like, you don't brag about shit you're supposed to do.
That's right.
And it's true. It's hard to find reward in just doing things intuitively that are the right thing to do, right? Nobody jumps out of bushes with a trophy and says good job or anything like that. You just kind of break even. That's really all it is. So unless you look at the consequences of some of these shitty options, it's really hard to find value in what we would determine to be the good options at that point.
So the shitty options basically are a contrast then, and because like you say, you're not getting that incentive, that reinforcement, the good job for not doing drugs thing, because great, good job, that's what you're supposed to do. But when you line that up against if one of our options for our brainstorming is, crush up an Adderall and rail it. Like you're able to see like, well, okay, not that, and then maybe move towards the option that would be a little more palatable or effective.
Right. So I think options for this, like crushing up Adderall and railing it up my nose, that's one option. And I mean, what's another option? I mean, buckle down, plan for this, set a week aside, make sure I'm keeping in contact with my family, let them know ahead of time kind of what's going on.
Yeah. Let's just kind of compare those two options.
Right.
Right.
So when you're brainstorming, folks, what you would want to do is take those two options and essentially you ask, is it meeting my goals? Again, my goals were, I want to do well on my tests. I want to maintain a healthy lifestyle that is drug-free, and I want to, preserve the relationships that are important in my life. So if we go with doing a rail of Adderall, right? Does that and the answers are, I mean, either yes, no, or maybe, right? So
real quick.
Oh yeah.
Just gonna say, like, it for the two of you out there that are actually writing this stuff down, it really is useful to kind of get this out in front of you. And so when you have your
like on a grid.
Yeah, like a grid. So, we gave you two options for brainstorming. You're going to want to do about 6. We're just giving 2 in the interest of time, and so you get the concepts. You want about 4 to 6 options, and then you have your 3 goals, right? You have your goal of doing well on the test. You have the goal of living a healthy, drug-free lifestyle, and then you've got your final goal of maintaining and preserving the relationships with the people around you. And so that just kind of, if you can get that on a grid out in front of you, what we're going to be doing is taking whatever the option 1 is, rail a line of Adderall, and we're gonna select for if yes, no, or unknown, if it meets or does not meet each of our 3 given goals.
So with goal number 1, if goal number 1 is I want to do well on my test, does snorting a line of Adderall help me meet that goal?
Sure does.
So yes, I think we can say yes, helps me meet that goal. I mean, it might not pass the test, but well, who knows? So yes, we'll say yes on that one. Does it help me maintain a healthy lifestyle that's obviously drug-free?
Decidedly not.
So no. And then does it help me maintain relationships in my life?
Kind of an unknown.
So a maybe at this point, right?
Right.
Okay, so then my other option is I plan ahead. I segment the amount of time that I'm going to study, and I strategize while keeping my family apprised of my study habits in the interest of I'm not going to be as available. So does that help me do better on my test?
Yes.
Does that also help me live a healthy lifestyle that's drug-free?
Yes.
And does that help me maintain relationships that are in my life?
Yes, it does.
So that's a simplistic version of this, but obviously based on the consequences, both positive and negative, for both of those outcomes, I can effectively choose that as my best option. Now, again, that's just 2, so you'd want to have 6. Now, once I have that leads me to step 3, which is what?
Plan and try your solution. And so we're, out of the 2 that we ran through just now, the obvious solution is to, study, segment your time, plan ahead, talk to your support group and let them know, or your family or whatever, let them know what's up. And go from there. And so planning and trying your solution is just what it sounds like. It's like the actual nuts and bolts of how you pull that off. And so this is going to look different for everybody that tries this. This is where kind of the variability of each individual needs to figure out how they personally are going to plan and try that solution. If it were me, I might say, okay, I kind of live my life off of my Google Calendar. It pretty well organizes and dictates everything I do. And so I would say, okay, for this next week, I'm going to look to see when I have blocks of time that, so I have work, I have my internship, I've got school during these times, I've got a date with Sally, on this day and time. Okay. So I'll find out when my proposed blocks of studying can be. And then I fill my calendar. I plug those times in for the next coming week, and then I decide, like, well, okay, let's see. My family usually expects me for Sunday dinner. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it because Sunday's a day that I have to really crush it. So maybe what I'll do is I'll call my parents and I'll say, hey, I'm not making it for Sunday, but since I want to preserve a relationship, it's like, hey, maybe once finals are over, since I'm going to ace these finals, I'll take you guys out for dinner, and we can hang out then. And you know what? And then of course, like, whatever else I need to do to make it work. Maybe I need to talk with my employer, trade a shift with a fellow employee, so I can have the time. Ultimately, the idea is to give myself the time and kind of the bird's eye view, the helicopter view of the situation, and start making changes accordingly.
And I think one of the things that is in here is that, an important word is try. And you're not, I think the implication is that at times you're not always going to be successful, right? And that might be so that's not a that's not a criticism of the problem-solving method, folks. That's not to say that your way of going about figuring this out was wrong. Perhaps you didn't have the information you needed. Maybe the follow-through wasn't where it needed to be. There's any number of variables that led to your lack of success in this. And really what that is really good information for starting over and doing the problem-solving method again and seeing if you can refine that and do better the next time. So one thing I'd say is regardless of your intentions on this, be comfortable with the idea that it's not going to be successful, and also know when it's going off the rails and to get it back on track and start back on identifying your problem and goal, brainstorming options and choosing the best one, and planning and trying your solution. For a lot of people with their experiences, their options and their their version of how things are going to turn out sometimes is not in line with other people's reality. And what I mean by that is just, like some people don't take things as seriously as others do. And okay, that's fine. So you learn from that, you get better, and then off you go. So this is it's not like you use this once and then all your problems are solved. This is a method that we know to be the best way of coping with difficult situations that doesn't lead to any hazardous or risky behavior that could cause even more problems in your life.
The word method, I think, is an important thing to kind of underscore the point you're trying to make here. I think of the scientific method. The scientific method does not definitively say that you're going to get the result you think you're going to get. It's just a method that's based on gathering information, forming a hypothesis, figuring out how to experiment with it, analyzing the results, and then drawing a conclusion. And you can have an idea about how the world works and be completely wrong. It doesn't make the scientific method wrong. It just means that you need to go back to the drawing board. It's a method, as opposed to, I think people sometimes, not just with this problem-solving method, but with a lot of the other techniques that we teach, look at it as a recipe, and that if you add a little of this, a pinch of that, a dash of this, cook it at 350 for 20 minutes, boom, you've got the same, cookies every single time. The recipes that works that way. And this, obviously, human behavior is complicated as hell. And when, if you're plugging things into this problem-solving method and are expecting it to be like a recipe, and you're going to be disappointed. You have to have the approach in your mind that this does not guarantee results. It's just a good systematic way for you to approach a problem and yield the best overall results over time. Like the method that I just ran down, the proposed checking my Google Calendar, talking to my, family dinner, yada, yada, yada. That might not work. I might fall flat on my face. Again, that doesn't mean the problem-solving method's wrong. It means I need to reevaluate my approach.
Well, and it kind of like, what's that famous quote? Like I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Ted Bundy. That
Ted Bundy.
Yeah. Or I'm sure it was Thomas Edison or somebody like that. Somebody important.
Samesies.
Yeah, samesies. Yeah, exactly. So, I think that the idea is I mean, I look at this and I think, the opposite of success is not failure. The opposite of success is just quitting. The failure is a byproduct of being successful. Like, you're going to fail. It's okay. So be patient with the process. And we understand that you guys are under a lot of pressure as you're taking these tests, and or really making, for any of our clients that are listening to this, you're under a lot of pressure for making the right life decisions. That's okay, though, because pressure makes diamonds. So it's okay to stick with, the fact that being under pressure, it's not, college is not designed to be unicorns and rainbows. Like, it's supposed to be hard. And so if it is hard, good. I don't wish bad times on you. I'm just saying that's a good thing. And as long as you have a good outlook on it, hopefully, and you incorporate some of these methods, I think you guys will do just fine. So anything else, Jeff?
That's good for me.
Okay. Everybody, good luck on your finals. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time. And thanks for listening to the Gorilla Social Work Podcast with your hosts, Jeff Moore and Mace Warren. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into all things related to forensic psychotherapy. As always, you can head over to utahsbesttherapy.com to check out our program and check out all the links and resources in the show notes. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, and wherever you prefer to get your listener fix. Please share this episode with your family and friends, and don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating, which really helps us out. You guys are awesome. We'd like to stay and chat longer, but we're lying. Good night.